Hello, I'm Bryan Eccleshall. I'm an OCA tutor in fine art. Been doing it for about 5 or 6 years now, and I'm the unit leader for Drawing One. And this is my studio at Block in Sheffield. My creative process is strange, and it's changed a lot over the years. It used to be very much target driven. I would come up with an idea and then I'd try to fulfill the idea, or I'd have a whim, or I'd think something was interesting and go, that's interesting, I'll do that. And that work was okay, but it didn't really develop. Each work seemed quite separate from the other works that I made. Every time I was making something, I would start from scratch. So over the last few years, I've changed it, and it's much more organic, I suppose, and generative now, in that I concentrate on colliding things together. I make visual stuff sit with other visual stuff. I'm interested in visual similarity, so I've been making collages which use news items, photographs, and I maybe mix them with Caravaggio paintings. And sometimes there's similarity because a lot of the news we get at the moment is set in the Mediterranean, and there are horrible things like beheadings and stuff. And you see those in John the Baptist paintings or Holofernes paintings, and I think there's a similarity. So I'm deliberately pushing things together to see what happens. It doesn't always work, but it's always generative. Even the failures are interesting. The finished piece is important, but I think I focus on the process more. I think the secret to making good work is to have a good process, and the work is a side effect. Finished works are a side effect of a process which we might call creative process, or we might call a making process. I try to remove the word art from anything. I don't try to talk about art because it puts too much of a burden on the maker. I think it's useful to talk about work, and I always balk when I see students write about their art, and it's like, it's your work. We decide. Society decides, and history decides whether it's art or not. So it's work. You just turn up and you make work, and stuff happens. And some of the stuff gets resolved into more finished pieces, and some doesn't, and some might, but it might be 5 years away. I'm working on images that I started working on. 5 years ago, I was kind of playing with some of these images, and I'm actually recycling actual drawings and objects, and sketchbooks and notes that are quite old. So I don't think anything's ever finished. I think it's all preparatory work in many respects. You may stop working on something and sell it to someone, and that's what we call, and frame it, we call that finished. But I think it's beneficial, certainly when working on new work, generating new stuff, and when learning, so for students, is not to worry about making completed work, just to make lots of work. Not really. I don't really consider the viewer. I've got some people I know who I trust, and I know they egg me on, and I post stuff online a lot, and I send certain things to certain people and say, what do you think of that? So in some respects, I've got an audience in mind, but it's not an audience in general. It's my mate Chris, or my mate Alex, or my mate Dale. So yes and no. I think it's really dangerous to try and make something comprehensible to an audience, to make it bland, because what happens is it ends up looking vanilla and generic. Whereas if you're specific and detailed, you might make it obscure for some people, but you'll make it very, very meaningful for others. It's not that I'm making work to get across a certain message or an idea. I'm not being didactic. I'm not telling people what to think. I'm making the work because I'm trying to work something out. I'm trying to speculate through this messy process of making stuff and pushing pigment around and sticking things in books, and it's really not a very straight line way of making stuff. It's really complicated, and it has lots of reverses and failures. But I'm trying to come to terms with some of these ideas. That's why I'm making the work. I'm not making the work for an audience. So to try and make it, to reverse engineer it from what an audience wants, that ain't art. That's design. That's when you ask people, what do they want? Oh, I want a faster car, or a, I don't know, a lighter rucksack. And then you work backwards from what the customer wants, because you can sell it to them. Art doesn't work like that. Art emerges from somewhere different. and it goes out in the world, and it either finds an audience or it doesn't. But I genuinely believe that if it's bland and sort of designed, engineered to be liked by lots of people, it will be loathed by people or ignored by people. Whereas stuff that's maybe engineered or designed, something that comes from somewhere that's real, it will find an audience. There's a lot of people out there. You have to maybe find that audience for it, but you make the work for yourself. I think for yourself and a few mates, that's a good audience. Bit of everything, really. I have workbooks. I don't really think of sketchbooks as sketchbooks. I don't sit in front of a subject and make sketches. I've never been that kind of artist. The only thing I tend to draw from is other art. I'll stand in the National Gallery and draw a Van Eyck drawing, or work from a photograph of a Caravaggio or something like that. But I do use books. These, I get but they're kind of workbooks and scrapbooks, so they're kind of full of things little drawings I've made on other bits of paper and cut up. Just stuff that I think of, copied from the newspaper, stuff that's cut out of art magazines or whatever, little ideas. I'm always doodling. If I go to a lecture, and when I was studying, I'd go to a lot of lectures, I'd end up doodling, and I'd end up doing these really strange little drawings, often of galleries with people inside galleries looking at things. So it's all about showing strategies in a funny sort of way, or little machines, or little, I don't know, and they all kind of get, I don't know, I don't throw them away, or if I do, I go through them before I throw them away and then work out which ones to keep. And then I stick them with things, and I kind of end up sticking things together, and then I return all the time. And you can see these have come out of another book. And they're taken, that's a drawing. That there is a drawing of a barn door from a Dora Carrington painting, which I've subsequently painted a little bit, which it's this little barn door here on this painting here, which is in the tape. And it's just, you see things that catch your eye, and you document them, you find a way of catching them, and now we can catch things on the phone easily. But to do a little drawing is nice. And then they get saved, and then they get, periodically I just go through them. And these are not dead. It's not like I move through these in a logical way, or go page by page. I mean, there's probably empty pages, there's things that might get stuck in because it was on the wall and it fell off. I had a blitz the other weekend. I came into the studio and I worked just in this sketchbook. I had 3 or 4 of them open, and paint and glue and scissors, and I went through and I cut up stuff and I traced stuff off pictures, and I came up with a dozen or so new pages. I mean, some of which is that's a drawing by a friend who did it ages ago, and I just took it off. He didn't want it, so I just took it from the studio. It's been on the wall. So I've stuck it in here and then I've traced something else, a bit of Rodin's Kiss from a magazine, traced it, and then if that lies over there, that then becomes a different drawing. That's the kind of collision I'm talking about, and these things begin to talk to each other. To me, they begin to talk to each other. There are recurring things which I'm interested in: the Tower of Babel, Medusas, skulls. Not skulls, not in a kind of heavy metal way, but the Memento Mori kind of skull. Jacob Epstein's rock drill is an interesting image. And then there are other artworks that constantly feed my imagination, I suppose. So the kind of sketchbooks aren't sketchbooks. They're places, it's an area where things can collide and clash. So by putting an AK-47 over a transcription of Magna Carta, I don't know. You do it and it might be something. It might not. But you put it next to a prisoner from Abu Ghraib, and these things start to talk to each other, I think. This idea of violence and law and abusing prisoners, and then you stand them on a painting by someone with a kind of a bombed out city instead of the box that he's actually standing on. That could be something. That might be something. It might not be something. Yeah, I don't push it. I try not to. I think the problem is if you're precious, and that was always a big thing when I was studying myself, was you shouldn't be precious about your work, but also you shouldn't force your work. You shouldn't have only 3 things that you're doing that you work really hard at. You should have like 20 things, and you should ignore 17 of them for most of the time and work on 3 things. And then when they get boring or overworked, you pull away and then you go and work on something else. And that means that you're always nothing gets overdone. I recently told a student, don't work on one painting at once, work on 4 or 5, because what you do is you tend to overwork them. And the problem with pigment is if you overwork it, it just goes brown and goes sludgy. Whereas if you've got 6 of them or 5 of them laid out, once one's getting a bit too much, you can go and work on another one. If you still want to work on another one. And that helped because they kept fresher, and then they started to talk to each other. And it's all about these relationships, I think, of things banging into each other and generating stuff. And then you can't stop making work. Periodically, I think I go through my work. I don't have a sort of a set plan, but I do, like when I maybe go through sketchbooks and I look through and I sort of see what I like, or what's working, or what's interesting, or what's curious. I mentioned earlier about sort of not worrying about finished pieces. A lot of people might know the fact that I did drawings of, big drawings of other artworks. In a way, I know when it's finished because I've finished the drawing, and it's pretty straightforward. Did I know they were good drawings? Yes, I think I did, just because I know what a good drawing is. Part of the way you hone your skill in terms of discernment is you expose yourself to a lot of art. I mean, I'm looking at art all the time, and okay, it's my job, but I'm looking at art. I'm looking at art documentaries. When I go on holiday, I go and see art. I'm going away this week, and I'm going to go and see some art. And it's about being exposed to it. How do you know you're looking at a good football match? How do you know someone's a good footballer? You watch a lot of football. How do you know if someone can sing? You kind of listen to a lot of singers. It's not really a shortcut. How do you do it to yourself? We can all be self-critical. There are things that you kind of self-assessment is tricky because we have ego and inadequacy and self-doubt and all those things. I think often we know. I've spoken to students in the past where I've said, this is the best one. This little drawing you've done here, this is really exciting. And they go, I know, I really like doing that. And I knew it was going well. And you think, well, you kind of know, but because it's on a bit of, kind of cheap paper, and maybe you think, oh, it's not proper. But then the one they do on the good paper at the end of a section is much more sort of tight and overwrought, and they've spent hours on it and they got bored, and you can see it in the work. They've tied themselves up. Whereas actually to make 10 more of these little ones would be a much better use of their time than making one of these. Make 10 1-hour drawings is better than making one 10-hour drawing, because you're not going to sell it. It's not a piece of work you're going to sell, a frame, or it's not a career thing. It's a learning thing, and you do most of the learning in the initial thing. But in terms of how do I know something's good? If something looks, and it's difficult because the opposite is also true. If something looks exciting, then, or I'm not sure what's going on, then I think that's worth running with a little. If something's really boring, that might be useful as well. Boring stuff that's ridiculously dull could be interesting, if played out long enough. Stuff that's horrible, and I mean horror, trauma and horror, that's exciting because people are fascinated by it, and it actually reveals quite a lot. Things that go too far, that are maybe not obscene, but that push the envelope. I mean, I've been working, I don't know if you can see in the background, there's a guy in a hat with a mask. I made a painting which I've got rid of, but it's not this, but this is the same. It wasn't a very good painting, but I made this the other day. And I'm just calling that Joseph Beuys in a gas mask. I don't know why that's exciting, but there's something about that image. And a friend of mine tells me he looks exactly like a particular comic book character who I didn't know. But there's something interesting about that, and it keeps drawing me back. I keep wanting to make that and redraw it. So I'm listening to myself in a way. What am I drawn to? No pun intended. What do I want to keep doing? What retains its interest? And the things that you want to keep making, there must be something going on in it. If you want to keep drawing flowers, it's because you're interested in flowers. If you have to force yourself to draw flowers, then you're not that interested. Students worry, I think, about their work being boring or interesting, or about something that's boring or interesting. It doesn't matter, actually. It's the drawing or the painting that has to be interesting, not the thing you're drawing. Giorgio Morandi, the Italian artist, painted the same bottles and jugs and vases his whole life. They're not interesting objects in and of their own right, but the paintings are. and it's his engagement with them that makes them interesting. He makes them interesting through the work, and I think that's a lot of what a lot of art does, is it makes people look at the world differently through the work. People didn't see Provence as being blue and yellow until Van Gogh came along and said, look at the sun, look at the orange, look at the yellow, look at the... It was just a place in France. And people didn't see it that way. Now when we go there, we see it through his eyes. So a lot of it is about finding something and just engaging with it. And if it talks back to you and you want to make it, then that's what you should be making. I don't always think they're my ideas, actually. The things I work with are often by having this kind of collage-y approach to making, which is played out in the work. I collage things in the work, in the workbooks, and I've been making a series of digital collages, which is now I've got 600 and something images, and there's a folder on my desktop of my computer which is called raw material, and any images I see that I make or I photograph or I draw, and I photograph my sketchbooks and they get recycled into those images as well. Or if I see something online that's interesting or a news item with a good image, I put things together and things spark, or they don't. I mean, if they don't, they get deleted and you edit them. So it's just being open to that possibility that things are connected for me. And a lot of it's about visual similarity. There are moments, like I was reading a book earlier this year about Philip Guston, the American painter who gave up abstraction and went off and made kind of cartoony type paintings of kind of Klansmen driving around town having a cigarette, or people in bed smoking or whatever. And they're really sort of profane paintings in the sense that they're not abstract expressionism, and the abstract expressionists hated him for making these sort of cartoony, clumsy, but they're fantastic paintings. But he realised that this kind of triangle, this Klansman hood was interesting. And it's like a pyramid, and it's like, if you put it on his side, it's like a wedge, and he used it in lots of different ways. And I've started using that same hooded figure because obviously there's a rise in that iconography in our news items, particularly from America, and which I'm troubled by. But I'm also using it ironically. I mean, I'm putting one of the things I've done is I've made one with a hood, and I've put a kind of light hanging off it, like they're a deep sea creature that's seducing people. Now, there's something about that was just a thing. It was like a drip of paint, and I thought, it looks like one of those lights that those anglerfish have got. Oh, that's interesting, because they're kind of drawing people to them in an interesting way. So the visual, so just by pushing things around, stuff happens. You have to be open to it. You have to recognize that these things happen, but you have to play. You have to push it around and play, and not have the idea fixed in your mind. To me, I mean, other people can there are people who can read books on theory, get ideas from that, and make work that is informed by something complicated and theoretical, and they can use that as a way of exploring that encounter. I'm not doing that. I'm finding it useful and rich to engage with art history and with images from the news and 1970s science fiction, my childhood, bits of and jokes and art that I like, and pushing it together and just seeing how it works or doesn't, and it is fruitful for me. I've got more things than I know what to do with, in a way, and too many threads to follow, which is how it should be. I mean, I came in the other day and I made what you can see behind me, and people might recognise that resembles, but isn't, a painting by Sigmar Polk called The Three Lies of Painting. What I've done is, instead of painting, and you might be able to see the postcard of it on my notice board, what I've done is I've painted the canvas and left all the bits that he painted blank. There's something underneath that. I was going to do a painting underneath, of something else underneath it, but I changed my mind. So all the background, the drawing that relates to that painting, and the dribbles and the underpainting sort of now becomes part of this painting. I don't know what's going to happen to that. It may be finished. It may have something going on top of it. But in a way, the practicalities of it, you make something because you don't know what it's going to look like until it's made. It's really important. Ideas are sort of out in the world, and to catch them, you have to go out into the world and get them. But that's like a trap almost. I made a trap and caught something. You put a trap out in the forest and you don't know what you're going to catch. But then when you get it, you have to decide whether you want to eat it or not. That's interesting, because there's a bit of it you're not completely in control of. If I just sat there and went, I think I'm going to paint the canvas part of Sigmar Polk's Three Lines of Painting, is that a good idea? I don't know. Probably not. I won't do it. So you don't do it. You can always talk yourself out of making work. But by doing it, by suspending that kind of self-criticality just for a moment and say, I'm just going to do it and see what happens. If it's rubbish, I can just paint it out or take it apart and put another bit of canvas on and make something else out of it. You can always edit things out. But if you haven't got them, you can't. So you make work and then you edit it. You don't edit it in your brain, edit it in the world. Well, this is a phrase that's used a lot in the literature that we have as OCA tutors and students. I think it's related implicitly to things like originality, and I think students worry about it, and I think they worry about it unduly. I'm always saying that the work emerges from the work, which is, you make the work and stuff happens. It's not about trying to be original. You don't sit there waiting for an original idea. Originality is somewhere you arrive at, not somewhere you start from, despite it having the word origin in it. Newness comes from developing things in interesting ways rather than starting from somewhere fresh. There is always someone who's done what you've done. We're not original. We work with the material we have, which is our intellect and our memories, and actually, if you put those together, you do have something unique. If you make work and you try and make work that's unique, somehow that doesn't always work. But Rubens was always copying. He had bits of other paintings in his paintings. He would steal. He would paint a head of Hercules from a sculpture he'd seen in Italy or in the Vatican into one of his paintings, and it would be John the Baptist's head or something, or there'd be a pose from someone else. Picasso was always painting other people's paintings. He did the whole series of the Las Meninas paintings, the Velázquez painting. And it's a way of working out your voice. You do that, and what you do differently and what you do the same and what you do, is a different size, and with your competence or incompetence or your materials that are different. That's where it develops from. It isn't something you go away and sit in a darkened room until you discover it. You have to find it. You find it by doing stuff and then working out what it is. And it may be not what you expect, and you have to be prepared to sort of it's sort of counterintuitive. I, for years, railed against the use of paint in art. I mean, I was not a painter. When I started my master's study in 2008, I said I slagged off Matisse or something to a friend, and he had a proper go at me. And now I'm a huge fan, and I've seen that work through his eyes and seen how intellectually rigorous it is. And it's not Duchamp, and it's not conceptual art, and it's not the things that I was interested in. But it's opened up a whole new area for me to explore and to love and enjoy. And some of those things that I've learned are coming back into the work. So it's this kind of weird collision of appropriating stuff, colour, paint. The personal voice comes by triangulating your position in relation to other stuff and just pursuing it. And that's how it arrives. You don't develop it in private. You develop it by making stuff. I sometimes get asked by students on study visits or in events like this, or sometimes when I'm talking with students, I say, make 20 drawings. Why? Well, because you'll learn something. Well, what will I learn? Well, I don't know what you'll learn, and I don't know what I would learn. I'd have to make 20 drawings to find out. Once you've made 20, then you'll be able to tell me what you've learned. There isn't a shortcut, but I guarantee something will be learned, but I don't know what it will be, because we're all different. And we have to notice things, which is why reflection on the work is important. Taking time to stop, put all the work up, and go through it and work out what's happening is really important. And the personal voice is probably, and the simple reductive description I use for students is often to have looking back on the work and imagining that your practice is like a stick of rock, and there's a word that runs through the stick of rock, and all you've got to do is find the word. And you find it by looking back over your work and going, oh, I'm interested in shapes. That's my thing. Or colour relations, or I'm interested in texture, or I'm interested in colour and texture, or I'm interested in politics, or I'm interested in... And that's where it's noticing that you've already got one. In a way you arrive at a personal voice by looking back and going, oh, I think I've got one. But there's no point where you woke up and went, today I'm getting my voice. It's something you find that you already have, but you didn't know you were developing it. It's weird, but it's not something you should worry about, it's something you should work at. When I did my 365 drawing project, which is now a few years old now, but people seem to remember it. It's sort of one that stuck around, and sort of what I'm known for in a way. A lot of those were made at the end of the day or in the evening. I knew what I was going to draw. I had a pile of images which I was working from, and I printed those out. So on a quiet Sunday afternoon, I would work on and print out 20 or 30 images. So I had a stack of them. So when I came to sit down and do the work, I could get on with the work. I didn't have to sort of faff around, finding pencils, finding paper. That was all prepared. I'd all cut, gridded up, pencils were there. From not doing the work to making the work was a really short period of time. I could just do it. I could put it down and pick it up, put it down, pick it up. So I made it easy for myself. Also, if I missed a day, although I did do a drawing for every day, and sometimes I got ahead of myself because I had to bank some because I was going away, or I knew I wouldn't have time. So apart from in the first week, I think, in January, I had a reserve, or I was pretty much on track. But if I missed a day, I didn't beat myself up. Just miss a day and just do it the next day. The danger is if you think, I haven't done any drawings for 3 days and it's mid-February, I must give up, it's a waste of time doing the sketch day. No, it's not. You just missed 3 days, it's fine, just get on with the next one. If you're looking for things to draw all the time, that will take a lot of time. Just set yourself a project. Draw all the corners in your lounge. There you go. There's a project. That'll keep you busy. All of them. The corner of the video recorder, the corner of the television, the inside corners of the room, the inside corners of the window. Just do that and build it up. If it has a thematic link, then you're building up something that becomes complicated. Each element need not be complicated, but it becomes complicated because it's got lots of elements. That's one trick, to make it seem like it's more than the sum of its parts, and that provides momentum and impetus to do more. If you really don't have the energy, and I don't know what creative energy is, there's only energy really, then you basically have to force it. Either you say, I'm going to do it, or I'm not going to do it, and you find a way of doing it. If it's something you really don't want to do, the chances are the drawing won't be any good anyway. If it's a struggle, in terms of you have no energy to do it, or no desire to do it, then it's probably not going to produce a great piece of work. Go to bed and read a book. Read a good book, or watch a Andrew Graham Dixon documentary on, Italy or something. Instead, feed your brain some other way. Get infused in a way that suits you. It shouldn't be a chore. It should be something you want to do. You have to stick at it. And anyone who's done it, and I know several people now who've done these 365 projects, whether they're drawings or writing, whatever. It works. It does work, but you have to do a little a day. Don't beat yourself up if you miss a day, and let it grow, and make it easy to work. If it's convenient to do it on your phone, do it on your phone. Get one of those sketching apps on your phone, do it on the bus into work. Find a place. There's usually a place where you can do it.